It's good to see you again. How's it going?
Sound quality good? Okay. So, welcome. Any first-timers here?
Yeah.
Okay, mostly first-timers. So I'll just drop about who I am and what I'm doing here. And my background is that I have a PhD in psychology, yeshiva Talmud, and my earliest days working in the field, I wound up working with a lot of people with addictions. Gee whiz is a real big chiddush because my father was one of the notable people in the field working with addictions to drugs and alcohol. It stayed with me that I have the sensitivity and the experience having dealt with it for a number of years. After I moved to the New York area, I worked in hospitals and outpatient programs, and while I'm basically burnt out in terms of working for hospitals and outpatient clinics, but my sensitivity to the problems of addictions hasn't gone away. It gave me an opportunity to learn from my father an awful lot. When I moved here was in 1989 to New York. And I was probably one of a very limited handful of people who had any background and qualification to deal with problems related to drugs and alcohol. While it was not something foreign to the adult population, but it was something that was just beginning to get noticed with the adolescents, that there were teens that were getting involved in drugs and alcohol. And there were a number of things that took place in those early years. And one of the things was that it was very difficult to get somebody to be accepting about taking a teen to a drug rehab. What about kosher food? What about Shabbos? Who's going to help be mekarev the kids? And together with the entry of teens and kids into the addiction scene, it wasn't just that they were involved with an addiction to drugs and alcohol, but it was a little bit more than that. They were getting involved in a lifestyle that lived in the streets. So they were invariably getting thrown out of yeshivas. They were invariably getting into the patterns of hanging out and doing things that are not exactly producing nachas for the parents. And it really became a serious, serious problem that was catching note of everybody. Yeshivas were struggling with this. And at some point there were enough kids being thrown out of yeshivas that the growth of what you want to label second chance meisters for both girls and boys, mostly boys, began cropping up. And then there were people who were trying to send the kids out of town, whatever. There were very, very few people who were trained and experienced to deal with the addictions. And frankly, having been trained, I was not trained to work with the teen population. And that's what was landing on my desk. So I got to know the scene quite well. And then, of course, the next step in my development was that I had on my list a number of parents who were struggling with problems like this. What was interesting is that probably an average of about 7 or 8 out of 10 of the parents struggling with a kid that was on the streets acting out. Today we have the labels OTD. Those times we were talking about kids at risk. Then they made a nicer name, a more politically correct name, kids in the parsha. Today KIPS means kids in pain. But there were various labels that were given for it, and there was the opening of a program called Mask. That they have a table here, and some of the staff is going to be here, which became a system to provide support for the parents. There's meetings on a weekly basis. There's a Monday night meeting, a Tuesday. My Wednesday night meeting has been going on for 24 years, every Wednesday night at 8:30, unless it's Yontif for Tisha B'Av or something like that. And I did not used to take off for Hanukkah. I began taking off for Hanukkah because nobody was coming. And if I'm making chasana that week, I take off. This past year, Tisha B'Av was on a Wednesday night, and we, for the one time in all the 24 years, we moved the meeting to Tuesday night because people wanted the meeting to happen. In any case, the bottom line is that that brought me into a place where I was dealing primarily with the parents. And yes, I've had the teens coming through my office. My practice today is far more centered around, which is only private practice, around working with couples. And one of the things that stands out is that there's an old klal that I observed a long time ago, and that is that the stability of the child is directly related to the unity of the parents. If parents don't have a solid unit, this is a threat to the child. The child cannot be completely comfortable and stable. And one of the things that we've gotten to observe many, many times is a kid who goes away to a rehab or a treatment program, whatever they're going for the treatment for, whether it's trauma, the addiction, or whatever. When they come home, what is the environment, the avira of the home that they're walking into? And these things, this is a really important variable. We've paid a lot of attention to this over the years, and it's really a critical thing to make the home a pleasant, happy place. I'm going to be a little bit arrogant, okay? The work in my home was to make the home a happy place. It had to be that. Baruch Hashem, it's a sizable family, and today, almost all my kids are married. And granted, there's Baruch Hashem enough good reasons why they should stay home to eat the siddur on Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, they're busy. They have little ones. They're all looking to come Shabbos for us to see this. Why? We worked hard to make the Shabbos to Kasidis into a fun place to be. Whether it's the Divrei Torah being short and interesting, whether it's in entertaining discussions, whether it's with the little kids. I remember when my kids were little, I would always stock myself with a couple of candies or taffies in my pocket. And I'm sitting at the Siddur Shabbos, and everybody, the fish, the soup, the this. And at some point, I lift the candy out of my pocket. I'm sitting there just holding it in my hand like this until the kids notice it. Oh, Tati, it's hitting, right? And I start tossing it around to here, to there. You gotta be very careful. You don't throw candies where there's left around, but that I hide it here, I hide it there. It's fun and games. But if that keeps the kids participating in a Shabbostic environment, right, it's a critical piece. And it's not a one-size-fits-all, but the approach that you have to have something that makes your Shabbos table and a pleasant place to be, makes your home a pleasant place to be. I nap Shabbos afternoon. I finish benching, I take a few things into the kitchen, and it's lights out. I'm sorry, lights out. My eyes are closed, right? My wife doesn't do that. She's busy sitting in the living room entertaining whoever it is that's there, whether it's the kids, the tzigah kimon, the son-in-laws, the daughter-in-laws, the einiklah, whatever it is. Right? She's busy doing that, right? We're going to miss that this Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, she's going to mix and match and get what she has to out of being here Shabbos. But the stability of the child, it has a direct relationship to the unity of the parents, making the home a pleasant place to be. When a kid will come out of a program, where are they coming back to? Are they coming back into a place that has conflict in it, that has strife, that has achdus? That's the question, and that's an important piece. That's much of the Shalom Bayis work that I'm doing now. It's, yes, we need the parents to be happy with each other, but it has a direct impact on the children. Let me take some questions to see what, how I can contribute to helping your Shabbos become a gainful experience.
What about if someone's divorced?
So let me give you a early history of mask. The question is, what do we do if a parent is divorced? We now have a kid. How can you make an environment when there's only a single parent there? When mask began, the first meeting was in Ruchama's home. You'll see her here over Shabbos. She made a meeting in her home in Flatbush on a Sunday night, and jammed several dozen people into the place. I don't remember the number. It's a huge number of people. There were politicians, there were Rabbanim, there were Mechanchim, there were professionals, and there were parents. At this meeting, there were 8 parents who spoke to share what their experience was. And this is early days of cell phones. They're driving around in their cars trying to find their kids. Where are our children? And they're at Playboy Billiards, they're at Dunkin' Donuts, they're at Prime Time. They were in all kinds of different hangouts, and sometimes they were hanging out on Ocean Parkway, on Avenue M, on Avenue J, on Coney Island Avenue. And the parents were circulating in their cars, and it was mothers. And when they shared their stories, there were 8 sets of parents of 8 kids were there. 7 of the mothers were single divorced mothers. One was both a husband and a wife. And it became very, I can't have an at-risk kid, I have an intact marriage. We now know that's a myth. But there are divorced parents. Did the divorce contribute to the instability of the child? Maybe. I do know that what will contribute to the stability of the child is having a healthy environment to come home to. And guess what? Sometimes the healthy environment is a single parent. It's a healthier option. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge because there is a father role in the home, there is a mother role in the home. That father role is missing. And we have to find what elements we need to add to that so we can compensate for that. If a child is in an unloving environment, the child is going to struggle. And how much do children want to get back so that they're quote unquote stable in an unstable home? So it's a major challenge.
I just want to add, I'm coming from a therapist perspective. I just want to say that nowadays I don't see a correlation between intact families or non-intact families.
Correct.
And I think that, sometimes you have a happy home also, where the parents are united. It's like the apple falls far from the tree, where there's a huge wind, and I'm finding other factors that play a role in the children choosing, not even choosing full analysis.
Okay, and one of the things that we're going to actually be talking about a lot over Shabbos, and how do I know this? Because I've been here a few times already. Some of the other factors that stand out are things that happen to a child, they're events. and they're major events. And in short, trauma. And one of the things about trauma that we need to keep in mind, we can have real elementary, childish perceptions of what trauma is, right? So if a kid gets mugged in the middle of the street, that's trauma. A kid gets molested, trauma. We see that. There are many other events that are traumatic. And it doesn't necessarily, there's no drama to it, there's no flashing lights and police and Hatzoli. There's a lot of other events that can be traumatic to a kid. If a kid gets embarrassed in school, whether it's by another kid, whether it's by a Rabbi or a faculty member, I'm absolutely beside myself when I see people using embarrassment and shame as a disciplinary tool. I freak out. Like, what? Where do we have the azus to assume that just because I'm a Rebbe and this is the Talmud, that I have the right to be Malbim Pnei Chaver? What authorizes me to do that? It incenses me greatly, and yet you're going to find a lot of people. But that's what the kid needed. How do you know that's what the kid needed? Torah says you can't do that. You should know that the Gemara about Malbim Pnei Chaver Barabim explains why. What's the avera of embarrassing somebody publicly? So the Gemara says, the person turns white, his blood flows away from his face, right? And that, the Gemara says, is tantamount to ritzicha, to murder, right? It's kilu we murdered that child. The Rambam, when he brings the halacha of Malbim Pnei Chaver, he says, and if the subject, the victim of this public shame, it makes no difference if it's an adult or it's a child. Now it's rational, because murder for a child is, if somebody murders a child, it's still a sirtzach. But just because the reasoning is there, but the Rambam says the halacha is there. Malbim Pnei Chaver, a Rebbe is not allowed to publicly embarrass a child. He loses chelik olam haba for that. So these are traumatic events that have major impact. You can even find what we might term soft trauma. Okay, a class gets split up into two parallel classes, and the impression is, this is the better class, this is the weak class. This is the Aleph class, this is the Beis class, right? The kids may not refer to it that way. This is the smart class, this is the stupid class, right? And there may be reasons why kids get assigned to this one versus that one. A kid that's put into the stupid class who feels he shouldn't be there can be traumatized by that. Now, again, no flashing lights. No hot solo or police sirens, but the kid can be traumatized. There's all sorts of events that can leave a kid in a situation of trauma. I grew up in Pittsburgh. My class throughout grade school was comprised of 8 Talmidim, at least the upper years, from 5th grade and on. There were 8 kids in the class. It's out of town. That's what you get. And we spontaneously had a shir that we used to get together and learn every Shabbos afternoon. And we take turns to go to this one's house, that one's house. We learn for half an hour. We play the rest of the time. Then we go home for mincha, shalshidas, whatever. And one day, one of the guys comes over to me, one of my classmates, and he says, "We're kicking you out of the shir. Don't come to the shir this week." Now, they did that to somebody else, and me and him would get together every Shabbos afternoon, and it was perfect. It was the two of us having our own little thing. We both figured out how we're going to compensate for being thrown out of the chair. Had we not had that, that could have been a traumatic event. I was rejected by my peers. Simple. Rejection hurts. So we're going to be talking over Shabbos a lot about trauma, right? And be aware that there are no hard and fast rules about how people react to it. We can.
How could you know where it comes from?
You might not. You might not. As a matter of fact, there are people who are trauma victims that carry the trauma with them for years and years and years before it ever rises to the surface. Anybody who works in the mental health field, all right? Once we've been around a couple of years, you've had cases where something winds up getting disclosed years and years later. I'm just flashing back. I had a case that was where a young woman came to me. This is in Pittsburgh days, so it's like way over 30 years ago. And what brought her in was a physical symptom that was not amenable to treatment with medication. She did the medical route. So she comes my way, and what winds up happening was that I smelled a rat. Now, I'll tell you exactly how I smelled it. This is not the first time that I've seen this, but it was very dramatic. I'm trying to help her relax, to be able to reduce the anxiety that triggers the medical symptom. And she's relaxing for like a minute or two. Now, I'm sitting in my office chair over here. She's 6 feet away. It was a decent sized office. 6 feet away on a recliner. And I'm talking her through this relaxation exercise. And in a blitz, she's on her knees in front of me, gripping onto my knees, saying, "Help me, help me, help me." Nothing happened to her. Wait a second. There's something going on in her cupola, and we need to figure out what this is. Fine. Got her back into her chair. And from that time on, I did not do relaxation exercises with her until months later. We needed to try to identify what's going on. Now, there's a phenomenon called relaxation-induced anxiety. Right? Now it sounds like it's a contradiction. People who begin to relax and suddenly kablooey, they have a spike of anxiety. It's a major event for them. What happened? And some people have trouble sleeping because of this. Now, what the experience of this is that this is not a common, but when it does happen, it's an indication of trauma. Now, the kind of trauma might matter as to how it converts into a symptom like this. But let's just follow some logic over here. This individual, when she began becoming relaxed, at some historical point in time, was violated and was attacked and was traumatized. She now does not want to let herself get relaxed, because in a relaxed state, she can't protect herself. This is what the logic is. And that when you find relaxation-induced anxiety, you can Dr. Google this if you choose to, you'll discover that these are all cases involving molestation, rape, trauma. It makes sense. And in fact, I began trying to talk around to find out what's going on. Then I had another tip. She's a young adult. She was in law school or something at the time. And I decided, let me get some history from her. But I had this inkling that I need to do the history carefully, not because I'm necessarily looking for a specific marker, but she grew up, this is a non-Jewish woman, in a military family. Her father worked for her father was in the military. And he kept on moving around from one army base to the next, or military, whatever, I don't remember which branch of the military he was in, but he kept on moving from one fort to the next, which meant that they relocated approximately every year or every 2 years. And when they relocated, she had to go to a different school. So I decided, you know what, let's call her Carol. I don't remember what her name was. Carol, who was your teacher when you were in 2nd grade? Oh, Mrs. Jones, okay. Who was your teacher when you were in 3rd grade? Oh, Mrs. Smith. How about 4th grade? Can't remember. Where'd you live when you were in 4th grade? I know that between here and here, she had to do the math to figure out where she lived when she was in 4th grade. And there was a gap of about 2 to 3 years that she could not remember the name of a teacher. But she remembered teachers from before that. And she was a full year with those teachers during whatever, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. She could not for the life of her remember. That was a red flag. She blotched out. It's as if somebody, you highlight a couple of lines on the database, and you hit the delete key, and it goes into the recycle bin. It's out of sight, right? And it was a very. I made a note of it. I said, okay, if I'm looking for trauma because I'm seeing relaxation-induced anxiety, that's where I got to go. And it took quite a while. We did hypnotic work for a couple of months, and we discovered what had happened, right? But it was hunting around. She had no conscious memory of any traumatic event that happened. And if it would not have been uncovered in a hypnotic trance, it might very well have never come back into her conscious mind. So recognize trauma causes immense brain changes. But that does not necessarily mean that you can put somebody in front of you who can tell you exactly what that trauma was. A lot of times it gets blocked. A lot of times it just gets put away to where it's dormant and it goes schluffy somewhere, and it's difficult to access. But it's a very remarkable thing. What comprise the list of symptoms from trauma? It's a huge list. And what it tells us on this end is when we're listening to somebody, we're hearing about somebody that's struggling, a kid, an adult, you always have to have the question in your mind, is there a traumatic event that made this happen? Maybe not, but you always have to ask that question. More questions, please. Drop louder. I'm over 40.
You mentioned about the Shabbos table. My question is, what about the child who is no longer coming to the Shabbos table? They're in the room probably on its phone. A few times that she'll come down, let's say it's because she's hungry, not for the Shabbos meal. So when she comes down, we try to engage with her and see if it's so good. But do you have ideas of what about the Shabbos table?
Okay, so I'm going to give you some general ideas rather than a specific prescription, because the specific prescriptions people would have to know a whole lot more before they started. And then of course, how much of this is us telling you what to do, or more or less we do a better job of telling you what not to do. There's an approach that in TP we talk about this a lot, but it really needs to be spoken about by everybody. And that is that we will do far more for our children by being inviting than by being directive. If we're going to take the stand of being instructional, telling our kids what to do, we're putting ourselves into a bind. Let me explain briefly what that is. Most of us went through 8th grade with some secular courses, okay? And in one of the science classes, I can't remember, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, whatever it was. I mean, I had more in high school, but there was a scientist by the name of Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton came up with 3 laws of physics. Now, a law of physics is not one that you vote on, and it's not one that you can repeal, and it's not one that you can break the law. It's just, this is how things are. So one of Newton's laws is gravity. Now, he wasn't mechadish that, right? The Eibishter created the world, and there's gravity. You hold something here, you let go of it, it's going to drop down. One of Newton's laws, I don't know what Newton called it. Okay, I don't know what the science books and the physics books call it. I don't remember what the name is. But it's for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Now, I'm going to assume that almost everybody in the room, if not everybody, has been on an airplane at least once. Now, what makes an airplane move? The wheels on an airplane, by the way, when it's on the ground, are not connected to an engine. There's no motor there. There's no motor connected to the wheels. The wheels basically hold the thing up so it doesn't scrape on the ground. What makes the aircraft move is the engines that are powerful enough that the blast of exhaust that comes out of the back pushes the plane forward. So if you have an airplane here, here's an airplane engine, you turn it on, it blows out, right, the exhaust this way, and it makes the airplane go that way. Right? Now you got to do that with enough pressure. It makes the airplane go fast enough so that it lifts off the ground, etc., etc. That's one of Newton's laws. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now, that's physics. Now let's talk about emotion. Let's talk about how people behave. And one of the things that we'll discover is that if you become confrontational, you are going to be met with resistance. Right? Now, we can bump into each other in the hallway, we can say Shalom Aleichem, we can chit-chat. If I'm going to start getting confrontational with you, right, you're going to automatically become defensive. Right? It's just natural. If we're going to do this with our kids, we're going to get exactly what we asked for. We're going to get the reaction. So if you have to be at the Shabbos table from Kiddush until we finish benching. You're going to get the kids putting up a fuss about that. Why? Because you're making them do it. You're being forceful. If you're going to be forceful, you're going to get an equal and opposite reaction. I want to do the opposite. So here's what, now, if you say, don't you dare come to the Shabbos table, they might actually do it. You don't want me here? Okay, I'll show you I'm here. But you don't want to play that game. It's paradoxical. You're saying the opposite of what you mean. The way in which you get your kids to the Shabbos table is you be inviting. And when they're ready, they will come. Now, we're not talking about having a Shabbos table that's going to have conflict as the main course. But we're talking about you make it an inviting place. When they will be there for a couple of minutes, you make that experience pleasurable for them. Let me give you an outside parallel. There's a yeshiva that davens shachas at 7:30 every morning. And there's a book of Pliny, let's call him Moshe. Moshe comes marching into the Beis Medrash that started shachas at 7:30 with his tefillin in tow, and he walks in and it's 7:45. What is likely to happen to Moshe? In all odds, there's a Rabbi or a mashgiach or somebody there that's going to come over to him after davening and say, I'm going to fine you $5 for coming late to shachas. What's going to happen? He'll go home, I need $5, he gives it to the Rabbi, and he's off the hook, right? The problem with giving these negative consequences is that they teach nothing. And all that's going to happen is that he might try to protect himself, so he's not going to do it again, right? Or he might find a less limited source of funds, and he's going to do whatever he feels like. The point is that we're missing a terrific opportunity. The opportunity is not about can we punish him enough to keep him in compliance, because compliance is not the name of the game. What we're interested in doing is giving him a reason why to come to Shachris on time. And if we want to approach this from a chinuch perspective, I want this kid to look forward to davening at 7:30 every morning. If I make tefillah something that he wants to do, he wants to have a chelik in it, he'll be there. Now, why is he not there? Once in a yovel is because a kid has trouble waking up. That's the exception to the rule. The bigger rule is, what am I doing there? Why do I need to do it? Because you made a rule that I got to be there? They're not machshav tefillah, they don't understand it. They're not unfamiliar with it, but it's like, what are we doing? So I have to stand here for 45 minutes and babble away what it says in the siddur, and then go out and eat breakfast. There's no meaning to him. What you really need to do with a kid like that is sit him down and have him understand better, carry to him the messages of what tefillah is, how geschmack is. I'm going to talk about this on Sunday, Be'ezus Hashem. Tefillah is a gift. A guy doesn't have it. The Nachash was told that he's going to eat offer kol yemei chayav. Why? Because a Yid has to turn to daven to be able to have what to eat. The Eibusha says, I don't want to hear him. Leave him over there. No sound. Crawl. You can crawl in the dirt. So the point is that that we have tefillah is a gift. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Come, talk to me 3 times a day. I want to hear from you." Do our kids see that? If they don't, then why do you expect them to come to shul on time? What for? It doesn't mean anything, right? Do we feel that our tefillahs matter? That if I daven for something, that the Eibishter hears the tefillah, the Eibishter is makabel the tefillah. Do we hear that? Do we teach our children? So and so is going through a tzorah. Daven, have them in mind. Do we make conversation with our kids? Do you daven every day? What do you ask for? What do you consider important? Right? Do we do that? Several years ago, more than several years ago, I was at a Torah Messiah convention. There was a workshop that somebody gave. He identified himself. I can't remember the name. He was a 9th grade Rabbi in a yeshiva somewhere, and he begged his manal, I want to give a shir on the tefillah. After 3 years, they said, okay, you can give a shir for like 1 hour a week. He said, it's nowhere near enough. He said, we're not altering the curriculum for anything else. How can you, in 1 hour a week, make tefillah something sweet and geschmack? He has a classroom of 25 buchim. How do you do it? And among other things, he taught them the structure of tefillah, this where the zimmer comes from, and Az Yasher, he went through all that. Then he said, boys, listen to me. You're going to daven 3 times a day. You can daven 3 times a day anyways. And you know very well that everything that we're going to have in life is what the Eibush is going to give us. And we daven so that we could get it. But guess what? There are things that you want, that you would want the Eibush to help you with. Put them into your tefillah every day. You daven Shemoneh Esrei 3 times. Shachas, Mincha, Maariv. right? When you're davening Shachris, there's nothing wrong, remember, it's a 9th grade class, with finding a place in Shemon Esrei, it's quiet, you can say it in any language you want, Tefillah, Nemeres, B'chol Loshen, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be Loshen Kodesh, and all you have to do is to say, God, I got a history test this afternoon, help me get a good grade. And that sounds awfully stupid, but it's not. Because it's important to that kid that he get a good grade on his history test. Seichel says that it fits into the bracha of Chainin HaDas. Right? So somewhere over there, you say, God, history test, good grade, please. And then go on to the next bracha. Everybody's going to have something. Somebody may have an ingrown toenail. Right? Bochum are prone to get ingrown toenails. By the bracha of Rifa'enu, ask the Eibusha to help you out with that. What you've done is you've personalized tefillah, and tefillah now matters to this kid. That's precious. That's precious. But that's the kind, when we will be machanach our kids, by making them find geschmack in learning, in davening, in the Shabbos table, in the whole spectrum of Torah and mitzvahs, we will have them. Now, what's sad is that the way that the community, the trend of the community is not to do that. We're busy disciplining. We're busy figuring out, if you're going to break the rule, you're going to go outside of the boundaries, then there's negative consequences. Some years ago, I found a website for a yeshiva out of town. And they had, on the website, there was an admissions tab. So it had all the forms that they have to fill out, the registration form, and the medical form, and the education history form. There was a document there the parents had to read and sign, and the document was called Reward and Discipline Policy. And it was 3.5 pages saying, if you do A, you get suspended for 1 day, for 2 days, for 3 days. Basically the criteria of what the yeshiva has to meet in order to expel the student and throw him out. And then there was a paragraph on the last page that if the kid gets enough points, positive points for doing this and this and this, they can be eligible to become student of the month. And I'm looking at this and saying, God Almighty, what is wrong here? We're spending clearly 7/8 of our kayach, right, trying to throw kids out. Compliance, they have to follow the rules. Make the learning and the Torah and mitzvahs geschmack and welcome by them, and then you have them. The stuff that we're imposing on them and we're pushing them to do is the stuff that they're going to resent. It's the stuff they're going to say, no, just leave me alone, let me be. I want them to be, but I want them to find it geschmack, right? Did you ever give any of your kids when they were little a kind of a nash that they were not familiar with? And the kid doesn't want to taste it. they don't want to touch it. But it's good, taste it. I don't want to, I'm scared of it, I don't know what it is, right? Our tafka I'm not talking about doing this with a 1-year-old kid, but we're talking with kids that epis a little bit of an ability to reason they do have. Expose them to the geschmack. Except for benching licht, and except for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, did our children ever see us cry during davening? Think, did they ever see us approach tefillah as an emotional thing? My father, describes this, it's one of his books, but I remember when he came back from Eretz Yisrael saying that he had seen this. He was by the Kaisel. It's probably in the late 60s. And when he was there, he sees that there's a little entourage coming, a few people, and there's an elderly man who is obviously blind, and he's being held on both sides by probably family members, and they brought him to the kaisel, and he comes up to the kaisel, and he puts his hands on it, he kissed the kaisel. He couldn't hold the tillum in his hand because he was blind, he couldn't see it. And he says a few kapitlach tillum, and then he starts talking. And he starts to say, I need this and I need that, and so needs this, and so. And then he stops him and he says, Slicha, et ze kvar higadati etmol. Right? Anybody didn't get it? Sorry, I said that already yesterday. My father stepped back and said, what? The man is talking to the Ribono Shel Olam directly, face to face. Right? Do you know what an impact a scene like that can have? Right? When our kids see that this is an opportunity, Tefillah is an opportunity for us to talk to the Ribono Shel Olam and interact with him and connect with him directly. It's precious, right? What more is there? Once we feel that kind of connection, we're good. We don't need to vape on Shabbos. We don't need to text anybody Friday night. Who needs that? I have Shabbos. But are we making Shabbos into don't this and don't that and don't something else? Yes, there are lamites malachas and a whole bunch of the ovas malachas and toldas malachas. Yeah, there's plenty of restrictions, but the restrictions are in the context of Shabbos being a gift. It's a beautiful gift, right? Are you aware that when you eat the best macholim on Shabbos, the Eibishter has tainig from that? You say it in a posik. We say it by Kiddush Shabbos Batug. Oz Tisanag al Hashem. Right? The Eibishter gets tainig. I ate the giggle. Where does the Eibishter get the tainig from? The Eibishter says, no, my children are enjoying themselves. We have tainig from that. You ever play with your baby on the floor? Right? You play with the baby, you tchachka in until the baby laughs, till the baby smiles. Okay? Who's having enjoyment then? The child is obviously laughing and giggling at, but the parent is. That's Shabbos. Right? Can we convey that to our children? Yes, enjoy Shabbos. The geschmack you have Shabbos is going to give the Eibishter tainig. It's a different mindset. Don't do this on Shabbos, don't do that on Shabbos. Enjoy Shabbos. Okay, I think it's time's up because we have something else in the program. Thank you for listening and thank you for participating. And Bez Hashem, I'm here all Shabbos and bother me.